Okay, Mike, let's go top to bottom and stay with you and go with the Rebels since you've already started to talk about Chad Kelly coming off a 4,000 passing season. I think the key here is that they lose 4 offensive linemen, of course the stud, Laramie Tunsil, but 4 total offensive linemen from the starting 5 is difficult to replace, especially for a team that hasn't mounted the type of running game that is usually equals SEC championship. But hey, if they don't blow the 4th and 25 against Hunter Henry and Alex Collins, they're in the championship game last year.
Right. You mentioned they're losing pretty much 80% of their offensive line, to include Tunsil and Cooper. That's going to be huge. And don't forget they're losing 2 of their top 3 receivers in Treadwell and Core. So who's going to be back other than Chad Kelly? We don't really know in the offense. Who's going to play running back? Jordan Wilkins or Akeem Judd? Neither one of which is bringing a top name back to the backfield. So it looks like it's going to be Chad Kelly's team to carry, at least on the offense. And of course, they've losing some talent on the defense as well. It's going to be interesting to see. I think Ole Miss is going to be a little bit overrated coming into the season because of the return of Chad Kelly. I don't think people are going to appreciate the amount of loss of the offensive line, the receivers, and then the defensive line talent as well. I think Ole Miss might be set up for a disappointing season next year. And the great part is we'll probably know on the first game when they travel to Orlando to play Florida State. The good news for Ole Miss is they don't play another October. Pulls that out, they'll have a chance to regroup in Oxford to include a home game against Alabama.
Yes, I applaud the Ole Miss football program for scheduling a meaningful game. Florida State, Ole Miss, I can't wait to see that one. Florida State or Ole Miss not playing anyone Power 5 this past season. Yeah, when these handicappers look at these teams, too much attention given to the quarterback. Let's see who's back on the offensive and defensive fronts. Let's start there when we start to handicap some of these teams. And for Ole Miss up front, offensively difficult. David, your thoughts about the Rebels who beat Bama again for a 2nd consecutive season and besides a wild play could have been in that SEC championship game.
Yeah, you mentioned they beat Bama, but then 2 weeks later they go and get blasted by Florida and also lose to Memphis. So it's they kind of take the character of their quarterback and Chad Kelly, while he did show highlights and stuff, to me he still kind of reminded me of Bo Wallace in a way. We didn't know what kind of quarterback we were getting week in and week out. So I think this brings another chance for him to get some continuity going. But that might be tough, as we talked about with these, them having to replace offensive linemen. And Laramie Tunsil's gone. But then they're counting on a freshman coming in. Maybe does he come in? Do you want to have to count on another freshman to anchor your left side of your line? That's asking a lot for another 2 freshmen to come in and take on these SEC defensive lines. And it's I kind of agree. I get the Ole Miss hype just because it is the quarterback coming back, but I can also see where they can fall flat on their face. Replacing Laquan Treadwell, their best receiver, their offensive line is going to be in shambles for a little while until they get some continuity going in the spring. But they also have to, the Kondichi brothers on the defensive side of the ball and replacing some defensive backs. But they've started practice a little bit. We've kind of heard what they're doing in the backfield. They're kind of been impressed with some freshmen. Redshirt freshman Miles Hartsfield, Hugh Freeze seems high on him. Also mentioned redshirt freshman Montrell Custis and Alex Givens as an offensive tackle, as another young guy, and another Jalen Julius. So these young guys that Ole Miss, they've been recruiting well. They're getting them to come in the spring, getting their feet wet, and Hugh Freeze seems high on these guys. So they do have Florida State coming up. So they got to get on track pretty fast.
Yes, Mike kind of alluded to, this is the one team in the SEC that's kind of bucked the trend, even though they haven't made it to Atlanta, in being a top-level team that's been like bottom 3 or 4 in the SEC in rushing, have not mounted a big rushing attack, not a big back in the backfield. They've done it slinging the ball all over the field and with a defense that just brings DNs, and the secondary's been phenomenal the last few years. So, Chad, what do you think about the Rebels?
Yeah, if I'm looking at the Rebels, I'm kind of going to go off of what David said a little bit, and the fact that the secondary, it's good to see that the young guys are showing up in spring because you've got a lot to make up for there when you lose two of your key seniors, Trey Elston, and of course, Hilton being gone as well. That's a secondary that struggled last year. It was number 13 in the SEC in passing defense. But yet turn around and they have one of the best passing offenses in the country. And that's just kind of the ebb and flow that you saw. A lot of injuries that affected them at times on the defensive side of the ball. But I think Tony Connor, C.J. Hampton, Zedric Woods, would be another great addition if they can get those guys in and get them healthy and get them ready for the fall. That secondary, like you were talking about before, the youth showing up, the guys that they've recruited previously, you've got guys on campus. There's some depth there. There's a lot more depth. I know at times Ole Miss will, they'll substitute in 20, 30 guys on defense. They just keep rotating these guys in consistently. At any given time, so they're always keeping guys fresh. This last year, you saw a lot of struggles with injury, and of course, you talk about the offensive line. And let's not forget about Cooper. You turn around, you lose Ben Steele, you lose Aaron Morris, along with Tunsil, who could be the #1 overall draft pick coming up. Greg Little, who was a big-time 5-star freshman, coming in is going to be looked in to fill the shoes of Tunsil pretty quickly. That's going to be a lot of pressure on him, but he does have the ability, has the capability there. I don't think Hugh Freeze and his staff would put this kid in that position if they didn't think he had the capability of doing it. You turn around and you got Javon Patterson and you got Jordan Sims. Those two guys are going to need to fill in right away at the guard position at the offensive line. Sean Rawlings is another guy you'll want to look at. You'll get him at the right tackle. He filled in for Fawn when Fawn had to move to left tackle. So I think that the Ole Miss offensive front will be set. It's just a matter of can they make the replacements to get to that #1 passing offense? And look, if you want to win and you want to get to the championship game and you're coming out of the West, you got to have defense. We've seen it out of Alabama, #1 defense in rushing, in the nation. They could stop you. So that's what Ole Miss is going to have to get in place. They're going to have to get a defense that can stop some people and not give up the points and definitely not give up the games late like you've seen a couple times with Ole Miss in 2015.